development itself. Development projects, for instance, in the 1950s and 1960s which were designed to modernize the economy. Yeah, remember modernization theory, remember Truman's speech, the emergence of modernization theory. The main aim is basically to modernize the economy, right? To modernize the economy and remember all the aid that is coming from the West to the poor countries, basically to help poor countries to modernize the economy. Now, that effort itself often discriminated against women because of mistaken assumptions about women's roles. Yeah, remember we talk about gender roles, so there is a mistaken assumptions. There's some assumptions that were made that was quite wrong at that time, where development planners assume women were or should be homemakers. Therefore, homemakers are non-productive. You know, those if you stay at home as a mother, you 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 cook and you look after your children. Those are considered as non-productive economic activities. Now, they did not recognize women's important productive and income generating activities. So the dominant post-World War II school of economic modernization only counted and rewarded certain types of work as productive. Now, in that types of work that is considered as productive, they excluded subsistence farming, for example. They excluded um, gardening, or planting of fruit trees, or planting of fruit trees, or collecting of mushrooms and all those things. Those are basically just to feed the family. So these are considered as subsistence economic activities, which doesn't feed into the income generating activities. So because of that assumption and about non-productive activities and assumption about income generating activities, which is given more prominence in society as countries pursue to modernize the economy. That in itself has encouraged the exploitation of natural resources and switching to cash crops from subsistence farming, both of which could have disastrous impacts on poor people's lives. Yeah, so there's a push towards cash crops, planting of cash crops, and from subsistence farming. So these have impact on the lives of the especially those who are poor. Now, to give an example, to look at a classic example of this is to look at the farming activities in the Gambia. Now, Gambia is one of the longest river in the west of Africa. Now, here in the 1970s, a large scale irrigated rice project was introduced in the Gambia. The idea was to dramatically increase the production of rice as a cash crop as a way to increase Gambian farmers' participation in the capitalist market. So it's basically to bring the farmers in the along the Gambia to be involved in capital has failed, and it has impacted both men and women quite badly, and that has become an important impetus to think about how to get women to be involved in development projects. Now, one of the most prominent person to talk about women in development is Esther Boshra, and we will also coming across her work when we talk about environment and development later on. It was partly because of her influential work in 1970s that development planners and program began to recognize women's central role in economic activities. So basically, she didn't die long ago. She just died in 1999. So her work is quite important, very prominent. So women's role in economic development was a pioneering, fully documented study of women in the process of economic and social growth, whether in employment, land rights, industrialization, or marriage throughout third world. Yeah. So the WID, yeah, was one of the first feminist critiques of development, And it was directed at those development planners who assume that women everywhere are unemployed mothers and wives and not economic agents in their own right. So that's her work is basically one of the first feminist critiques towards development itself. The concept, the practice, the approach of development is the work of Professor Muhammad Yunus and the Grameen Bank in Bangladesh. Now, a lot of people ask, can men be feminists? Yes, they can. They can stand by women, and vice versa. So, what is Grameen Bank? It was established in 1993 by Professor Muhammad Yunus. His aim was to help poor people work their way out of poverty by providing them loans and teaching them financial principles so they could start and run micro businesses. So because of his work, Muhammad Yunus and the Grameen Bank were joint winners of the 2006 Nobel Peace Prize. And the Grameen Bank became, out of it, became the largest microcredit scheme in Bangladesh, reaching more than half the villages in the country with over 2 million members, 94% of whom are women. This model of microcredit is now a mainstream tool in women in development policy, women in development approach when it comes to making development. Right, welcome to the third part of the lecture, which is be touching on the rise of gender and development, which is which is quite different from women and development. And this is about gender and development, basically the relationship between men and women when it comes to development. Now, this is about the questions of unequal power relations between men and women. Right? So raise the question, should we care about the impact of development policies and projects on people's relative power in their household and community? So this is basically about the position of power between men and women, which is quite different in society or even within the household. So it addressed a question like, should development project also address the fact that women in many parts of the world are subordinated to the men in their family and community? So it raised because of that, should we introduce